They saved her from the auction block. Then the black woman fell in love with both brothers. The day they sold her in Dry Creek, the sky was bright and merciless. Men packed the hotel porch, hats low, all of them watching the rough plank that passed for an auction block. Folks liked to say slavery was over now that the war was done, but the papers in their hands still spoke of contracts and years of service, and a black woman with a rope around her wrists still looked an awful lot like property. Lena May stood barefoot on the plank, dust curling around her ankles. The auction man, Mr. Talbot, read from a creased sheet as if he were listing off tools. "Colored woman, about 22, he called. "Strong, can cook and wash. Quiet. 1 year left on the paper out of Madison County." He did not mention the white scar on her shoulder from a whip, or the baby boy they had taken and sold 2 summers back. Those losses didn't add a single dollar to the bid. Lena kept her eyes on the street below. That was how you stayed alive in places like this. You let your body stand where they put it, but you sent your mind somewhere else. In her head, she walked beside a muddy river back east, listening to her mama hum over a pot on the fire, while up on the plank, Talbot's voice rolled past like far-off thunder. "Who'll start me at $50 for the year?" he called. A man near the front spat and said, "40. Another raised him 10 just to join the game. There were thin, dirty jokes about how she looked strong enough to do double work and maybe keep a bed from feeling empty. Lena did not flinch. Years ago, she had learned that flinching only invited hands and trouble. Near the back of the crowd, 2 brothers stood shoulder to shoulder. Caleb Hart was the older, heavy in the shoulders, sun-browned from riding fence lines, his mouth set in a straight line that didn't move much anymore. Jonah Hart was leaner, quicker with a half smile, his hands nicked from fixing busted hinges and wagon wheels on their small ranch outside town. They shared the same gray eyes and the same way of looking at a thing like they meant to understand it, not just use it. "You see her wrists?" Jonah muttered. "That's not a woman who signed up for a job." Caleb's jaw flexed. "Talbot calls it a contract sale," he said. "See, the judge stamps it. Folks get cheap labor, and everybody pretends it's different from a slave auction so they can sleep at night." He watched the rope bite into brown skin and felt his stomach knot. The bids crept up, 45, 50, 55. A year of a black woman's life still didn't cost as much as a decent horse. Jonah's fingers curled around the porch rail. "We've got the stallion money," he said quietly. "Either we buy new blood for the herd, or we take one bad piece of paper out of Talbot's hands and burn it." Caleb thought of the ledger at home, and of their mama coughing her lungs out after the war while men in town argued over whose suffering mattered most. Talbot called 60, and the crowd went still. 70, Caleb said. Heads turned. Talbot's face brightened. No one answered his call for 80. 70 going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Caleb Hart, he cried. The word sold hit Lena the way it always did, heavy as a shovel of dirt on a grave. She did not lift her eyes. Men who bought her always said they were doing her a favor. They always used the word freedom, like it was a coin they might toss her if she pleased them enough. Talbot shoved the folded paper into Caleb's hand and reached for the next sheet. Caleb barely looked at it. His gaze stayed on the woman on the plank, on the way she held herself straight on purpose, pride doing the work that rest and safety should have done. Jonah climbed the low steps and stopped a pace away from her. He moved slowly, palms open, like a man approaching a skittish horse. "Miss," he said, his voice softer than the crowd had heard it all day. "Name's Jonah Hart. That's my brother Caleb. We're going to take that rope off now." Her eyes flicked up, dark and tired and sharp. "What do you want for it?" she asked. "For the year you just bought?" Caleb unfolded the contract. Neat black ink pretended to own every day she had left on the paper. He tore it in half. Then he tore it again and again until the scraps drifted into the dust at her feet. "Nothing," he said. "You can walk away right now, any direction you please. Or, if you want honest work and a roof that doesn't leak, you can ride out with us to the Hart place. Either way, miss, nobody owns you now." A low murmur moved through the men on the porch. Someone muttered that the Hart boys had more money than sense. Someone else spat and said it wasn't their business what a man did with his own purchase. Talbot scowled at the wasted contract and turned toward the next lot. The crowd shifted. Dust began to settle. For the first time that day, Lena let herself breathe all the way down. She did not trust them. A woman who had been bought and sold this many times did not learn trust from a few torn papers and soft voices. But there was something in the way the brothers stood. One a small step ahead, one a small step behind, like they had already chosen to take the first blows if trouble came. She looked past them toward the thin road that ran out of Dry Creek toward low, distant hills. Either way she chose, she would still be carrying every scar they could not see. The difference was whether she walked alone. "All right," Lena May said at last. Her voice shook, but her chin stayed level. "I'll ride for a while, long enough to see what your kind of freedom feels like." Jonah nodded, relief loosening his shoulders. Caleb stepped aside and let her climb down from the block on her own, bare feet finding the ground without help. It was not a promise yet. Not to them and not to herself. But as she climbed into their wagon and Dry Creek shrank behind them in the hot afternoon light, something small and stubborn inside Lena turned toward the two men who had torn up a contract in front of the whole town. Later, folks would say she gave them her heart. On that first day, all she gave them was a chance. The road out of Dry Creek was rutted and mean. Dust lifted under the wagon wheels, then settled again like nothing important had just happened on the auction block. Lena sat on the plank seat beside Jonah, her hands folded tight in her lap. Someone had loaned her a pair of worn boots. They were half a size too big, so she kept her toes pushed forward and her heels pressed down, as if she could walk away just by standing up fast enough. Caleb drove, reins loose in his hands, eyes on the pale hills ahead. Nobody talked much at first. Silence, Lena understood. White men got talkative when they were drunk or angry or making promises they didn't mean to keep. Quiet could be a kind of respect, or at least a kind of caution. The wagon creaked. A meadowlark flashed across the road. Jonah stole glances at her, then stopped, as if he'd remembered she was not some colt he could study without shame. After a while, he cleared his throat. "You got a church song you like?" he asked. "Something your mama sang?" Lena hesitated. Questions like that could be traps, leading straight to talk about sin and obedience. But the sky was wide, and no one was clutching a Bible at her. So she liked Swing Low, Lena said at last. Sang it like the river itself was listening. "Always did like that one," Caleb murmured. His voice was low, almost shy. "Never could sing it right. Sounds different coming from a man who's only ever been chased by his own mistakes." "Everybody's been chased by something," Lena said, surprising herself. "Some folks just don't admit it out loud." Jonah smiled a little at that. The wagon rolled on. The Hart place wasn't much to look at when they turned through the rough gate. A long, low house with a porch that sagged in the middle, a barn leaning against the wind. A small corral, a chicken yard, a scatter of scrub trees reaching for a creek that dried up most summers before it reached the fence line. It was no big spread, nothing like the stories men told in the saloon when they bragged about thousands of acres and hundreds of head. But there was a feeling about the place, the way the porch chairs faced each other instead of the road, the way a rag rug hung over the rail to dry. It looked lived in, not just used. Caleb helped her down, then stepped back so she could stand on her own. "House is there," he said. "Barn's there. Outhouse you'll find fast enough." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "So we ain't had a woman living under this roof since Mama passed. So there's things not as tidy as they ought to be. You're welcome to set it in order however you like, so long as you let us know where you moved the coffee." "I don't stay for free," Lena said. The words came out quick, before fear could swallow them. "You tore that paper, but a year is still a year. I cook and wash and tend what needs tending. You pay me a wage and we keep it plain between us." Jonah glanced at Caleb. Something like respect moved across both their faces. "A wage is right," Caleb said. "We've got a little put by. Not as much as a ranch twice our size, but enough. You'll get coin at the end of each month, same as any hired hand. Food and a bed besides. And if I want to leave?" "You pack your things," Caleb said quietly, "and you go. You don't owe us a stamp or a signature to walk off this land." There it was, the line drawn. Not a perfect one, but clearer than anything she'd had in years. She nodded. "Then I'll work," she said. They gave her the small room at the end of the house, the one that had been their mama's sewing room. There was a narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked bowl, and a single window that looked out toward the low hills. On the sill sat a chipped blue cup, forgotten and dust-filled. She turned it over in her hand, wiped it clean with the corner of her skirt, and set it upright again. Somehow, that small act felt like staking a claim. This is mine now. Not the land, not the walls. Just this little space where my hands decide what stands where. The first weeks slid into a rhythm. Lena rose before dawn, lit the stove, and put coffee on for the brothers. She fried potatoes, baked cornbread, boiled beans, learned which pan Caleb always reached for without looking, and which knife Jonah kept sharper than the rest. She hummed under her breath when she worked, old spirituals and scraps of river songs, never loud enough to turn into a performance. The brothers listened without saying so. Once, Jonah picked up the tune and whistled a harmony that wasn't half bad. It didn't take long for word to reach town. A black woman living out at the Hart Place, not as a hired girl you could turn away at sundown, but with her own room and her own plate at the table. At the feed store, a man snickered. "You boys running a ranch or starting your own kind of menagerie?" Caleb's shoulders stiffened. "We're running a place where work gets done and folks get fed," he said. "You got a problem with that, you can come out and tell the cattle about it." Jonah heard worse, muttered under breath when he went in alone for supplies. She always knew those Hart boys were odd. Bringing color out there like it's something you hang on a porch. He let most of it blow past him. The rest he took home and kept to himself. No sense laying every bitter word at Lena's feet. She had enough of her own. In the house, life was quieter. Caleb was steady, moving through his chores like a man who had long ago made peace with hard work, if not with the way the war had carved up the world. He thanked her for meals, fixed the back step when she mentioned it, squeaked, and left little things on the kitchen shelf without comment. A better knife, a new dish towel, a tin of precious coffee when the last of the beans ran low. Jonah was lighter on his feet, quicker to talk. The one who would sit at the kitchen table in the evening and tell her about a calf that had to be pulled in the middle of the night, or a neighbor's wagon that broke an axle on the ridge. Lena watched them the way a woman who has been thrown into too many strange rooms has to watch, quietly and from the edges, studying for signs. Anger, entitlement, the sudden switch from soft to dangerous. Weeks went by and the switch did not come. She still kept her shoes by the door, a habit from all the places she'd been sent away from. But some nights she forgot to glance at them before she slept. Love didn't arrive like lightning. It came more like an old song remembered in pieces. The way Caleb's face softened when she set a cup of coffee by his hand after a long, cold ride. The way Jonah reached for the heavy water bucket before she could, not because he thought she was weak, but because he knew what it meant to have someone else carry weight for a while. She didn't name any of it yet. She just knew that for the first time in a long while, when she set 3 plates on the table and heard 2 men's voices drifting in from the yard, her heart did not clench in fear. It did something stranger. It lifted just a little, like it had taken one step toward a door she had never been allowed to walk through before. Spring came in slow, the way it does out west. One day, the wind was still biting through coats. The next day, tiny green things were pushing up through ground that had looked dead all winter. Out at the Hart place, the work changed with the weather. Fences to mend, calves to tag, fields to turn. Inside the house, Lena's days didn't look as different. There was always something to scrub, something to stir, something to patch. But inside her, the season had already turned. It started with the blue cup. One evening after supper, Jonah stood at her doorway, knuckles resting against the frame. "You mind if I fix that hinge?" he asked. "Door's been squeaking like it's gossiping about you every time you close it." She stepped aside. He worked quiet, tightening screws, rubbing a bit of grease into the metal. When he finished, he straightened and looked around the small room. His eyes landed on the cup in the window. "You keep that turned just so every day," he said. "Like you want somebody to see it from the yard." Lena shrugged lightly. "Cup was here when I came. I just cleaned it. Seems wrong to leave something made for holding empty." Jonah smiled. "You ought to put your name on it then." He took a stub of pencil from his shirt pocket, the kind he used to mark boards in the barn. He held the cup in his big, careful hands, and in small, uneven letters, he wrote Lena May along the rim. "There," he said, setting it back on the sill. "First thing on this place that belongs to you and nobody else." Her throat tightened. It was just a cup, cheap, chipped, not worth a nickel in town. But seeing her name there, in someone else's handwriting, like it deserved to be spelled out and seen, did something to her chest she didn't have words for. "Thank you," she said softly. He didn't reach for her. He just stood there in her doorway for a moment longer, hat in his hands, as if he was thinking of something, and then decided to keep it for another day. With Caleb, it was his quiet that drew closer. One stormy afternoon, clouds piled up over the hills, dark and heavy, the kind that made horses restless and men watch the sky. Caleb came in from the barn soaked through, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Lena grabbed a towel and stepped up to him without thinking. She reached for the hat, knocked it askew, and the water ran straight down her arm and onto her dress. They both froze. For a second, she felt foolish, reaching up into his space like that. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed, a low, surprised sound that warmed the kitchen more than the stove did. "Guess we both needed washing," he said. He took the towel from her hand, and instead of drying himself first, he wiped the water from her sleeve, slow and careful, like he was afraid of rubbing too hard. His fingers brushed her wrist just for a moment. Her pulse jumped under his touch. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I want to." It was nothing anyone else would have noticed. A wet sleeve, a shared towel, a laugh too small to carry past the walls. To Lena, it felt like someone had put a hand on a door inside her that had always been locked, testing the weight of it. Town, of course, saw other things. One Saturday, Lena rode in with Jonah to buy flour and sugar. Caleb stayed back with a lame calf. They hitched the wagon by the general store. When Lena stepped down, Jonah offered his hand. She took it. Her boot slipped on a loose stone and she tipped forward. For one brief, unguarded moment, she landed against his chest. His arm went around her to steady her. They both laughed, quick and embarrassed, then stepped apart. Across the street, a pair of women from church watched the whole thing. "First, she moves into their house," one murmured. "Now she's falling all over them in the middle of town. 2 brothers, no chaperone, no ring," the other said. "Nothing good comes of that." Word traveled faster than any wagon. By Sunday, half the congregation had an opinion about what went on under the Hart roof. Sitting in the back pew, Lena felt the weight of eyes on the back of her neck. The preacher talked about temptation and keeping to the straight path. He didn't point at her, but he didn't have to. Shame has a way of finding its own way to the right shoulders. After service, an older woman named Mrs. Yarrow stopped her on the steps. "Child," she said, voice low, "you need to be careful out there with those boys. Folks won't ask whether they're honorable men. They'll only ask what kind of woman puts herself in the middle of them." Lena held her Bible tight against her chest. It wasn't really hers. It had been Jonah's mama's book, pressed into her hands the first week she moved in. "Ma'am," Lena said, steady as she could, "the only thing I put myself in the middle of is work. Cooking, cleaning, keeping that place from falling apart." Mrs. Yarrow's eyes softened, but only a little. "Sometimes that's all it takes," she said. "A good woman doing her duty and 2 men too lonely for their own good. You just mind your heart, you hear?" Lena walked away with the words stuck under her skin like burrs. That night, she set their plates on the table a little harder than usual. The brothers noticed. "Something wrong with the food?" Jonah asked gently. "Food's fine," she said. "Just the flavor of other people's tongues that sits bitter." Caleb's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Somebody say something to you in town?" She could have brushed it off, could have carried it alone like every other stone life had handed her. Instead, she looked from one brother to the other, saw the worry there, and let a little of her truth out. "They say a woman who stands between 2 brothers is asking to be dragged in the dirt sooner or later," she said. "They say it won't matter what you boys are or aren't doing. In the end, they'll write the story like I was the trouble." Caleb set his fork down. Jonah leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the stove. "We can't stop folks from talking," Caleb said at last. "But I can tell you this, Lena May. You're not trouble to us. You're the only reason this house feels like a home and not just 4 walls." Jonah nodded. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "We know what you are here. We know what we are trying to be." She looked at them both, at the same gray eyes in 2 different faces, and felt something shift. Not the birth of love that had been creeping in for weeks, This was the moment she realized that love was not neatly divided, one piece for each man. It was the same steady warmth leaning toward both of them, refusing to choose which one was more deserving. That night, when she went to her room, she paused at the window. The blue cup sat on the sill, her name dark against the faded glaze. On the porch below, 2 sets of boots rested side by side. She imagined a line drawn between them, thin as a piece of string. Somewhere along that line, her own feet were already standing. Summer settled over the Hart place. 3 plates on the table, 3 voices in the kitchen, 3 shadows moving around one small house. From a distance it looked simple, but inside, one question kept circling the floorboards. Whose woman is she? It showed first in little moments. One evening, Caleb came in with a splinter deep in his palm. Lena sat him at the table, worked it out with a needle, then wrapped his hand. Without thinking, she kissed the bandage, quick and soft, the way her mama once did for her brothers. The room went quiet. Caleb's breath hitched. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Old habit." His voice was low. "I don't mind being thought of kindly. Not in this house." A few days later, a storm gathered over the hills. In the barn, thunder rolled and Lena flinched, not at the sky, but at memories that sounded like it. Jonah stepped in and put his arms around her. He didn't promise her the world. He just held her until her shoulders dropped. When she pulled back, he kissed her forehead, gentle as a hand on a skittish colt. "Storm's loud," he said. "Let it make the noise. We can keep quiet in here." In a big city, those moments might have vanished into the crowd. In Dry Creek, they might as well have been nailed to the church door. Mrs. Yarrow saw Lena's hand resting on Caleb's arm at the wagon. Mr. Hollis saw Jonah and Lena standing a little too close at the well, laughing at something only they could hear. By Sunday, the question had grown teeth. After service, the preacher asked them to stay. When the last hymn died and the church emptied, he folded his hands on a pew and looked at them. "Caleb, Jonah, Miss Lena, I'll speak plain because the town already is. Folks see you sharing a roof and, more than that, they want to know what to call it." "You could start by calling it kindness," Caleb said, jaw tight. "I know you tore up that contract," the preacher answered. "I know you pay her, give her a room. But kindness and confusion can look the same from a distance. Especially when a black woman stands between 2 white brothers. Child," he added to Lena, "you're walking on ground that doesn't have a map." Lena lifted her chin. "Plenty of white men laid with black women without asking any blessing," she said quietly. "Nobody called that confusion. They just let the women carry the shame." Pain flickered in his eyes. "You're not wrong, but old sin isn't a good teacher. So I'll ask what they're all asking. Are you promised to one of these men? Do you intend to be?" There it was, the question that wouldn't stay quiet. Caleb's ears went red. Jonah stared at the floorboards. Lena felt their answers pressing in on her, hot and urgent. "Pick me. Tell him it's me. Give the town a story it understands. 1 black woman, 1 white husband." Instead, she heard her own voice. I care for both of them," she said. Her hands shook around the hymn book, but her words did not. "I don't know how to split that up just so other people feel safer." Silence dropped heavier than any sermon. "You're saying you love both my boys?" the preacher asked softly. "Or you're headed that way?" "Yes," she said. Caleb twisted his hat. "I told myself I'd step aside," he admitted. "Just to let Jonah have his chance. He's younger." Jonah shook his head. And I told myself I wouldn't make you do that again after the war already took enough from you. I'm tired of walking away so other men can feel righteous. The preacher sighed. But this is the part, boys, where one of you is supposed to say, "All right, I'll be the martyr." That's how stories stay respectable. Lena felt something hard rise past her fear. And my part? She asked. Is there a page in your book for a woman who won't let men decide how much of her own heart she gets to use? He had no answer. Maybe there wasn't one. When they stepped out into the sunlight, curtains twitched all up and down Main Street. On the ride home, no one spoke. The wagon rattled over the same ruts they had crossed the day the brothers tore up her contract. Lena stared at the road and knew the next choice she made would not just decide where she slept. It would decide what kind of woman she would let herself be. Back at the house, they moved like guests in their own kitchen. Leftover stew, yesterday's bread, bitter coffee. Lena set 3 plates and 3 cups because her hands knew how, not because anyone wanted to eat. All my life, she said at last, laying her fork down. Men have stood at the bottom of some steps asking, "Whose are you?" Not "Who are you?" Not "What do you want?" Just "Whose?" They put me on blocks and porches, pinned papers to my name, passed me along if I obeyed. I learned to be quiet, to make myself small, to leave my shoes by the door. She looked at them both. The day you tore up that contract in Dry Creek, you changed that. You bought my body on paper and handed it back. I walked off that plank on my own feet. I'm not climbing back up on another block now, not even a church one, so folks can decide which of you gets to claim me. Caleb's voice was rough. Nobody here wants you to be property, Lena May. Not on purpose, she said. But when the world says I can only love one of you, it treats my heart like land to be cut in half. You take the north field, I'll take the south. I'm tired of being measured in acres. Jonah leaned forward. So what are you asking us to do? Remember what you did with that paper, she said. Everyone else trusted it. You tore it up. I'm asking if you can do that again with the rules about what love is supposed to look like. She swallowed. I love you, Caleb Hart. The words settled solid between them. She turned. I love you, Jonah Hart. Tears burned, but she held their eyes. If either of you asks me to pretend that isn't true, if you tell me to choose or get out, I'll thank you for what you've given me and I'll go. I'll find some colored town up north or cook in a hotel kitchen till my hair goes gray. I won't curse your names, but I will not cut my heart in half so other people can sleep easier. The room held its breath. Caleb shoved his chair back and walked out onto the porch. Jonah followed after a moment. If you want me gone, Jonah said quietly, say it. I won't poison this place for you. Caleb stared at the fields, the barn, all the fences meant to hold things in place. You were here before she was, he said. You'll be here after I'm dust. This land is as much your sweat as mine. He rubbed his face. I don't know how to share what I love. I was never taught a word for that wasn't ugly. Me either, Jonah said. And all I know is I'd rather stand next to you and feel this hurt than be alone and pretend I'm fine. They stood in silence while a hawk traced circles in a sky that didn't care about their rules. We already broke the world's rules once for her, Caleb said at last. We tore up that contract and took our licking in whispers and cold shoulders. Maybe this is just the next page. If the choice is losing her or learning to stand in the same room with the truth, I'll learn, clumsy as it looks. They went back inside together. Lena was still at the table, hymn book in front of her like a small shield. Caleb took off his hat. "You gave us a choice," he said. "Here's ours. We won't ask you to lie. Not to us. Not to yourself. If you're willing to walk this road with two foolish heart men trying to love you clean, we'll walk it too. We'll take the stairs and the sermons as they come." Jonah nodded. "No guns," he added softly. "No turning you into a battlefield. We sit, we talk, we remember we pulled each other out of a river before we even knew your name." Lena's breath shook out of her. She rose, took Caleb's rough hand in her left, Jonah's in her right, and held on. 3 people, 1 small kitchen, a future bigger than any word the town had for it. Dry Creek did what towns do. Some folks stopped riding out to the Hart place. Some crossed the street when they saw Lena, as if kindness were catching. Others pretended not to notice at all, but a widowed rancher sent extra fence posts. A black cowboy passing through tipped his hat to Lena in a way that said, "I see you." Mrs. Yarrow brought biscuits one afternoon and stayed for tea, her eyes softer than they'd been on the church steps. Years later, if you rode past near sundown, you might see a black woman shelling peas on the porch, 2 white men beside her, one mending tack, one whittling wood into nothing in particular. Children's laughter in the yard, little feet thudding, little voices calling Mama, Pa, and Uncle, not always to the same person. In the window, the blue cup with Lena May written along the rim, watching over a house that had learned how to hold more than one kind of love. People in town would still argue, that's not how it's supposed to be. But when winter winds came and nights grew long, even some of the loudest critics would admit, in their own quiet kitchens, that there was something steady and decent about 3 people who had refused to turn love back into an auction. Out here in the old stories of the West, folks like to pretend life was simple. 1 man, 1 woman, 1 straight line from altar to grave. But if you look past the dust and the gun smoke, you'll find people like Lena and the Hart brothers standing in small houses at the edge of town, trying their best to love without turning anyone into property. Maybe you've never stood on an auction block, but you've felt hands try to put a price on your heart, or voices telling you there's only one right way to care for the people who kept you alive. If tonight's story touched some quiet corner in you, I hope you let it sit there for a while and breathe. If this tale kept you company, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to the channel so we can meet here again on the next dusty road. Tap like if Lena's courage meant something to you, and share your thoughts in the comments. I do read them, and they help guide whose story we tell next. And if you don't want to miss the next Western love story when it rides in over the horizon, go ahead and ring that little bell, so you'll be right here with us when the sun goes down and the stories start again.